Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture brought to you by my sponsor, Mixum. Mixum Printing is the smarter way to print. Printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials, and the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns, and some of them you may have even heard about on this very show. And Mixum offers services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. And so if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com, and right under the running a promotion where listeners of this show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get 5% off their very first order. So that's Mixam.com. Type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive 5% off your first order. And without further ado, I have somebody that I think a lot of people know due to Facebook, who's an attorney, is sort of the comic book lawyer that we all love, because there's some we don't love, and that's Gamal Hennessy. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here. Good to meet you.
Yeah, no, I am super excited because I've wanted to interview you since all of last year, and you were busy, I've been busy, and obviously I'm part of your group, and I am super excited to be speaking to you. I know you're teaching the comic book class, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think a lot of people know you for that class, for a lot of the advice you give for free on Facebook groups and in Facebook groups. But what is your background? Because you have a very interesting path into comics and law and dealing with things that I think that a lot of people don't necessarily know about and know about your background, because you're not just coming into this and you didn't graduate law school and you're saying, I know everything about comic books. You've sort of lived it a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. So it started out, I started reading comics since I was 5 or 6 years old. And that actually carried into the point where I was in law school. And I graduated law school in 1996. And during that time, I actually got my first job as general counsel for a Japanese animation company. That was the first job I had out of law schools. And the job was basically taking a lot of animation that had already been released in Japan, licensing it in the United States, putting it into English, and then releasing it in the United States and Europe. I did that for about 4 years. And then when Marvel decided they wanted to break into the Japanese market, they hired me out of Central Park Media, and I became the international publishing manager of Marvel. And I did that for about 2 years, which means taking a lot of the books that had already been released in English, stripping out the lettering, licensing all of those books into other countries so that the local agents could then put in the local language and sell the books there. So I did quite a bit of that in Europe, South America, Asia, but my primary goal there was to open up the Japanese market. Once that market was open, I did a lot of other things in Marvel, like a lot of licensing deals for the merchandise, because that was when I guess Tobey Maguire was Hulk and Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man. Ang Lee was doing his Hulk. And so the merchandising program was growing very rapidly. And we were also doing a lot of deals for artists and writers to come in and work on a freelance basis, because Ultimates was actually growing then, and we had a lot of other different initiatives. And what I realized was that you would give a writer or an artist a contract, and you'd say, have your lawyer take a look at this. Let me know what you think. But I knew the person that I was talking to didn't have a lawyer, and he knew he didn't have a lawyer, and he was going to sign whatever I put in front of him because I was Marvel and he wasn't. He had no leverage. He had no position. He didn't even have an understanding of what it was he was signing. So when I left Marvel, which was like 2003, I opened up a practice called Creative Contract Consulting. And the idea was just to help people understand, what are you signing when you sign a contract? If you make a brand new character and you put it into a Marvel book, what actually happens to that character? Letting people at least go into the deal with open eyes. But as technology changed And as the internet kind of grew, more and more people had the opportunity to do creator-owned deals, or they became publishers on their own. And they didn't necessarily just need contracts explained to them. They needed contracts drafted. They needed contracts negotiated. They needed option agreements broken down in case, somebody wanted to pick up their book for a TV show. They needed work for hire agreements if they were going to hire some people to work on their books. So as the industry became more complex, my practice became more complex. And we got to a certain point where I realized I was giving quite a bit of legal advice to people who came in as my clients, but then realized they also needed help with project management and advertising and marketing and understanding distribution channels and all of these other things. So I sat down and I wrote this book back here, The Business of Independent Comic Book Publishing. And I released it last year. We did it as a Kickstarter. And it was very well received by the comic book community because it is a singular book in that there's not a lot of other books in that category. There's a lot of books on the craft of comics, how to actually make a comic. There are quite a few very good books on the legal aspects of comics, but there wasn't a book that really tried to break down the entire process of making comics that wasn't just someone's experience, because there's been a few books where someone who's gone through the process said, okay, this is how I went through the process, but they didn't really break it down on a systematic way. And that's what the business of independent comic book publishing is designed to do.
Even to go further into that, because obviously this also is not dealing with the Marvel way to do comics.
No.
Where this, because I've read parts of the book, and obviously, I read the Kickstarter, and I know sort of what it deals with. And I'm regrettably angry that I missed it. So I'm kicking myself for it. And we're going to talk about how to fix that problem for everybody in a minute. But the idea is that up to this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there was anything about dealing with independent comics. And also, independent comics, they've been around since the 70s. Obviously, I've had people like Howard Cruz, Trina Robbins has been on my show, and a variety of like Dennis Kitchen, which is the Underground Comics, which is a predecessor, I feel, to indie comics in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
But it's the idea that, up to this point, and indie comics exploded really in 2018, all the way up to now, and they're bigger than ever. There's never anything that dealt with indie, I feel. And it's something that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, where I don't remember anything saying, here's how you market an indie comic book. I didn't even think that was a problem until about 5 years ago, let alone even just being on the market. Because if you told me 5 years ago that Kickstarter would be bigger than anything else with comics, I'd be like, you're crazy. And so what has that been like? Because I think that's very important to talk about. I'm curious your opinion is that, what has that growth been like? Because your book really hits a niche that and hits a bigger problem, I think. And it's attempting to solve a bigger problem. And I know that people are going to be really pissed they can't get the book. But we have a solution, I promise.
Yes. Well, to answer the original question, there have been ways to actually publish independent comics, like you said, since your Robert Crumbs, since your underground comic scene in the 70s, since your ash cans. But because the internet actually makes that process from a technical standpoint much easier, it doesn't actually make the business of doing it easier. You still have to figure out how you're going to get your book into Diamond. You have to figure out if your book actually belongs in Diamond in the first place based on the nature of the book. You have to decide how much you're going to be able to spend per page to actually get this book put together. You're going to have to figure out who you're going to hire to get the book done in your budget. You're going to have to figure out a lot of things that if you go into, let's say you go into Marvel and you're going to, work on their book, all you really have to do is know how to make the book on time. And you have to make the book according to the script that they give you. You don't have to worry about how many different covers there's going to be. You don't have to worry about, is it going to be in libraries? That's not your problem. But at the same time, you don't get to benefit from the success of that book. other than your page rate. If you want to be an independent comics, you basically have to become a publisher in the same way that the gentleman from like went to Image and they built their own comic book company. You're going to have to build your own comic book company, and there's a lot of things that go into that that are not really explored in many other books to the level that I tried to do it in my book. So that's why the book is like 450 pages long. That's why the book has like 1,300 references in it, and it has in almost every major chapter there are forms and there are things that you need to consider for your book, because every independent comic is represents a unique business opportunity. There's no one size fits all kind of concept when you're putting together a comic, because your story is going to be different, your marketing is going to be different, the business model that you set up to actually make your book successful is going to be different, and you have to put those things into consideration every step of the way. And you have to spend quite a bit of time on it, I feel, before you even start making the book. Because if you make the book and then you try to fit it into the business later, you're going to probably waste a lot of time and a lot of money, and you could ultimately lose your rights to the book.
Yeah, and I think obviously we're going to talk about the solution, and you're extremely knowledgeable about this, and I know that you obviously deal with other things as well, and I also think that one of the problems that happens, because I speak to people all the time, and they don't know what a PO is, for instance, and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that a PO, a purchase order, for those who don't know, is a legally binding contract,
Mm-hmm.
and that if somebody agrees and then it's properly filed and all that stuff, and then a distributor stiffs you, and it's a $10,000 deal. I mean, there's legal consequences that you could pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And all these people don't understand this, and even trademarks and copyrights, and the fact that you can copyright something, you could also trademark something.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different legalities to it. And I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination. I used to work in Washington, D.C., dealing with appropriation law of all things, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm more of a government policy guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think and so I'm curious what your experience is with even just dealing with people on a regular basis, because obviously you noticed a lot of people had no idea what the hell they were doing when presented with a contract, and I'm sure that you either get calls or you get emails where there's a crisis in a Kickstarter where one creator wants to take it to TV and the other doesn't, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's a whole thing. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody in my head who has a big legal crisis
Mm-hmm.
with like 15 artists, and I think you know who I'm referring to. And it's a very complicated issue, and I don't want to be creating a defamatory statement per se, but there are people who I know who have contacted other people, and they're like, "What can I do with this circumstance?" And
Mm-hmm.
so, what has that been like for you dealing with all of this, and also starting to provide solutions to people, and also even just educating people, even free or paid?
Well, the good news is that over the past 8 or 9 years, there's been a lot more comic book creators who are going into the process with more open eyes. Because prior to that, it was a lot of my time had to be spent educating people on the fact that they needed a lawyer in the first place, or that they needed to actually understand what the difference between a copyright and a trademark is, or they needed to actually understand how they could determine if they own the rights to their book in the first place. However, with the rise of streaming television and the MCU and all of these deals and stories that have come up, you get much more people are much more understanding of the idea that yes, I need a lawyer. Yes, I need to actually understand the contract. Yes, I need to figure out, no matter what deal I'm doing, whether it's a creator owned deal or a freelance deal or an independent deal, I need to understand how the deal works, because that's going to directly impact my rights, my revenue, whether I own the book or not. So from the educational standpoint, it has gotten significantly easier. From the problem you still run into, the problem that I run into is a lot of times people will call on the lawyer after the problem has already been created. Now, I do have quite a few clients who they say, okay, I have a script. I'm now talking to artists. Now I need to, nobody's started anything yet. Nobody's done anything yet. Now I need to talk to the lawyer. That's actually the best time to do it. The worst time to do it is after the book has already been made and the Kickstarter is live. And now you want to try to figure out, okay, who owns what kind of deal is this? It is difficult to negotiate when a process is already in motion. It's like it's difficult to jump into a car if the car is already going at 30 miles an hour down the highway.
I would also think that if you're in the middle of a Kickstarter, you got 15 days left, and it's a $40,000 Kickstarter, and you're going to be doing 80,000. Looks like that also becomes more difficult. If it's $1,000 and there's a dispute, at $1,000, it's not easy, but it's a hell of a lot less complicated, I think, because there's less money at stake.
Yeah, people become much more. The thing that I always tell people is it's very easy to negotiate, let's say, the streaming television rights for your comic when your comic hasn't been made yet. It's you and 3 other people sitting around having dinner saying, wouldn't it be nice if Netflix picked up this show? If Netflix does pick up this show, we're each going to get 25%. Then you put that in a letter, you put that into a contract, everybody signs it, and now you can go make your comic comfortable knowing that that deal has already been worked out. And when I work out, it's called a collaboration deal with my clients, we actually look at 10 to 15 different types of media exploitation for every comic. So we figure out what the merchandising rights breakdown is going to be, what the television rights breakdown is going to be, knowing that the vast majority of comics never get to that point. But it's like I said, it's easier to negotiate that and have it in your pocket and know that it's there rather than, like you said, there's a Kickstarter, there's 15 days left, you've got tens of thousands of dollars on the line, and now there's a big dispute within the group of people that made the book about who owns what, who's going to do what, and who's going to get what once the money shows up. It's a recipe for disaster.
And this is what keeps you employed, though.
Well, I much rather people come to me early. Much rather they go, okay, we're going to make a, let's say, because I get quite a few clients this year, they're going to make a book in 2022. They've got their artist, they've got their inker, they've got the letterer, they're figuring out their distribution. Then they come to me. Okay, this is perfect because now we can actually make sure all the ducks are in a row and you can go out and make a comic and you're comfortable. What is less comfortable, you are correct, is when people come to me and say, I signed a deal 3 years ago, I didn't read it, and now I need to know what to do. Okay, well, we're going to try and pick up the pieces of your deal, but in many cases, there's not a lot we can do for you.
Yeah, and also it becomes even worse in a lot of ways because now if an artist is stuck in a bad contract or a writer feels like they thought they were getting 80 and now they're getting 50, it hurts the overall product and project. And then nobody's heart is in it. And then everybody just says, I'll finish this out. But then, they go and they kill off every single character. And then, well, less money's made because everybody's upset. And it creates a bigger issue. And then who really gets hurt is somebody like me who's a fan. And I get screwed. And I did nothing wrong. I'm not even in the deal. And then I'm getting screwed. Or sometimes, and I would imagine this happens, is that somebody just walks away with the money on Kickstarter. I've seen it in the wrestling world. And I know it's not comics where somebody becomes, not happy with their situation. They're managing the money and they say, screw this. I'm just going to take the money and walk away, not pay certain people, and I'm not going to dissolve the company. I'll let the company fall apart by itself, but I'm done now. And I've seen that happen, and I've been on the victim end of that. So it gets really ugly when this stuff happens. And then a bunch of times, a bunch of big settlements happen as well.
Yeah, and you're going into a situation where if you understand that the comic book industry is fairly small. So if you actually are running into situations where once, twice, multiple times, your name is associated with a bad deal, your name is associated with a project that did not go well, then when it's time for you to go get another deal or work with another group of people, that's going to be the reputation that's circulating around. So if you're planning to only ever do one Kickstarter and you run away with the money and no one, then, no one ever hears from you again. Well, that's one thing. If you're planning on having a career in comics, you have to actually protect your reputation in comics, which means that if someone backs one of your Kickstarters, they actually get what it is that they backed. If you're working with someone and you promise them X percentage of what comes through, if they don't get X percentage, you are now running into a potential problem. So it's better, like I said, A, to have the deal very clear up front, and B, once the deal is done, to simply do what it is, whatever your responsibility is in the deal. You get that done, your reputation is saved, and you can go on and make comics forever.
Yes, making comics forever. If we only could live that long, that'd be fantastic. I do want to get into the class, but I do have to mention, my friends over at Lone Wolf Comics have an amazing Kickstarter that is, I think, almost fully funded at this point, and it's Snowpaw 1, which takes place in the 19th century Scotland with a fierce heroine with an adventurous spirit nearly gives to the social expedition of her time, but a trite fairy tale ending is not to be, as Shirella McKinley discovers her werewolf lineage, and her eyes are open to the existence of a supernatural being and creatures of fantasies, and Shirella McKinley is Snowpaw. And that's actually live right now from the creator team of Robert A. Motari, Mog Park, Bruna Costa, Dave Lenz, and Katrina Rotes. And so you can actually join the Wolfpack by backing the Kickstarter today at lonewolfcomics.com/Snowpaw. It's a really great project, guys, and I am super stoked for it. And Rob Matari is one of those guys that is phenomenal in the entire Kickstarter world. And so I'm putting up the link for everybody who wants to back it. It's pretty cool. So it's up there, guys. Back it. It's a really great project to check out. And I'm planning to back it myself, and he's coming on next week as well. So definitely a cool book to check out. But now back to you. And this is what I really want to talk about, what everybody wants to talk about, is that you have the book, and now the book is out of print. You did really well on the Kickstarter, and that sort of set the foundation. And I am fascinated by self-help classes. I am not ready for your class yet. Come March.
How do you know you're not ready for my class?
I don't have a comic yet, so
you don't need a comic.
I'm not ready for it. I'll be ready for it in like a week. but I need it because your class, all jokes aside, when the student is ready, the master will appear. But let's leave it at that. But all jokes aside, obviously your class doesn't just apply to comics. I think it applies to anything dealing with contracts. And I think that for the most part, though, this is the successor, I think is the word I'm looking for, to your book, where you're teaching a live class or two or three classes a week. And then you have some, expert interviews, and then you host a Q&A. And so what was the impetus for this? Because obviously the book came and that dealt with a bunch of stuff. But now with things evolving and self-help becoming bigger than ever, what made you want to say, hey, look, there's so much more that we could talk about, and there's topical issues coming up and a variety of other stuff. So I'm super curious how all this came up, because this is what I think people want to know. And also, what is this class? Because this is something that is super interesting to me.
Okay. Well, I'll give you the quick pitch. The Comics
You're not going to get to me. You're selling to the audience.
The Comics Publishing Institute is a ongoing business and legal education service for comic book creators on every level. See, the concept was that while the business of independent comic book publishing, the book, actually dealt with a wide variety of issues, the problem with a book is as soon as you actually print it, the book is now old because something has changed in the industry. There's been new developments. There's been a shift in whether it's the economics or the actual business models. So what the Comics Publishing Institute, or CPI, what that does is it allows people to be up to date on everything that's going on in the industry so that they can make better decisions on a business and legal level about their comics. The way we do it is every 2 weeks, I will have a in-depth live video class about a specific aspect of the comic book industry. And then every week, we also have an open Q&A. So everyone who's a member of the organization can jump online, ask whatever questions they want to have debates, bounce information off each other to actually build up that community of people who are going to be sharing information to actually build up their comics. We also, because I have quite a few contacts within the industry, I reach out to a lot of different people who are specialists in different parts of the industry, have them come in for closed question and answer sessions where members of the group can actually ask questions about things that they're interested in and trying to figure out how to get their book to the next level. The other parts of what CPI offers is that once you join CPI and you start to pay the monthly fee, you get a free PDF copy of the book to start you off. Then if you decide later on you need some legal services in relation to your comics, there's a discount if you're a member of CPI. If you need one-on-one business consultation to build up the business model for your book, there's also a discount for that. We also have community forums, and we're going to have a network where people can actually work with each other and start to share information. And that is all wrapped up in one low price that you can actually join right now because CPI started mid-September.
And so to even talk even more about that, because obviously you mentioned something very important, that your book that obviously, you can't get physical and that you get a PDF when you join, it provides a lot of good information. It's a really good starting kit, but things have changed dramatically in comics, I think, in the last year.
Exactly.
And that's not nobody could have predicted the impact COVID would have on any type of business, let alone comics, let alone a bunch of other things have happened in comics. I think it's safe to say that Keanu Reeves, Scott Snyder, Jeff Lemire, Todd McFarlane were Boom Studios was not really factored into being on Kickstarter until they were on Kickstarter. And so that's a big change in the industry. And so what is that like to realize that there's been such a massive change in what's happened, and that legitimately 12 months ago, that I don't want to say you need to go back to the drawing board, but parts of it need to be redone. And even we're looking at companies like Image now are funding books on Kickstarter, and like this is sort of, I don't want to say it's out of whack, but what has that been like for you? Because you sort of, a whole change has occurred. Now, I'm curious what you think on this, because this is your wheelhouse, and I'm on the investing side of all of this. So as an investor, we are perplexed at Kickstarter and at indie comics. And a lot of people in, the comic book investing side dealing with high-end books are saying, like, what's going on here? Because prices have never been higher. And at the same time, though, also we look at all this indie stuff and it's like, what's the next breakout, and should we be putting money into Kickstarter books? And it's a very confusing entity.
Okay, well, let's deal with the investment.
I know I threw a lot at you. I'm sorry.
The investment and the Kickstarter piece first. If you're looking at the value of a certain book being based on scarcity, so the fewer copies that are actually in circulation, the potentially higher the investment price of that book is, then it makes sense to actually look at books in Kickstarter, especially if they're coming from artists or creative teams that have a certain amount of cachet, because those books by definition aren't going to have necessarily 8 or 9 print runs, which is going to reduce the overall value of your investment. If they have a Kickstarter and it's, a limited print run, then those books are going to be the most rare. If you're, building your investment portfolio based on rare books, Kickstarter looks like the way to go. in terms of just focusing on how the industry has changed since the book has come out, one of the last chapters in the book is fundamentally about dealing with change. Because as an independent comic book creator, it may take you 2 or 3 years from the time you decide you're going to make a book to the time the book comes out. And in that period, the business may change, the economics of your country may change, the social dynamics may change, and you're going to have to be able to adjust to that by the time your book comes out. So the good thing about my book is that it actually gives you a foundation from which to make decisions. At every stage of the development process, we say these are the considerations, these are the decisions that you have to think about. But we don't assume that there is one right answer, because, like we said before, every book is different when it's actually going through that process. The magic about an independent publisher or an emerging publisher is that there's very little bureaucracy. So if something happens very quickly and you need to change very quickly, you can do that because it's usually either just you or 3 other people, and you can get on Slack and say, hey, we need to do NFTs now. Whereas when you sat down and thought about it, there was no such thing. And
I
like,
was about
okay,
to ask you about that.
we now need to do this. Or all of the, you can say, let's say you were planning on getting your books into comic book shops last summer. And then you realize, oh, all the comic book shops are now closed. What are we going to do? But the book will actually give you the tools that you need to actually pivot very quickly to actually make the decisions that's going to put your book into the best possible light. It's one of the reasons why I did not try to make a single linear path, like this comics has to be done this way, because that's not actually how comics work, and it's not actually how business works. It's not actually how life works. So their CPI actually is a way to help keep people up to date and keep people informed about the changes, but the foundations are still the same. The legal foundations, the business foundations, the financial foundations are still the same. The details are going to be different in every case, but you still need a fundamental basis to start out with.
Because you mentioned NFTs, and I was actually going to ask, because I think that's one of the biggest changes as well. Where, I mean, the way I view the two biggest changes is that obviously a lot of companies are now coming into Kickstarter that are bigger companies than your traditional indie. And they're coming in a lot more. And then also, and they're coming in a variety of ways. So obviously companies like Zenescope and Boom are now much heavier in Kickstarter. At some point, I think Marvel and DC are going to jump on the bandwagon, and Image is there as well. To some degree, Scout is there, and I think it's only going to get bigger. But then we also have other companies coming in. You know, I mean, Scout technically comes in after the fact, that they come in where they're going to distribute your book after you fund on Kickstarter. I think Second Sight Publishing does it. I think there's a few others, and I'm missing some names here, but obviously, you know, and then obviously NFTs are the second biggest change I feel in this entire industry, because, well, you know, and NFTs are the Wild West in a lot of ways. And I don't know how I feel about NFTs, because I'm on the fence and I'm very confused on them as investments. And I think that a lot of people are, and I think 90% of them are going to fail and are not be worth money. But it's also the fact that it's on the table now. And so how are you adjusting to things that are also uncertain? Because it seems to me that like all these new distributors are popping up, and that there's so much change going on, and that Kickstarter is directly tied to it. And it's a weird time. And I don't know if anybody knows the answers to these questions per se.
Well, I think the key is to let go of the idea that there is a single answer. For every book, for every creative team, for every publisher, there's going to be options that are going to be available, options that are actually realistic, and there are going to be choices that are going to be made. And if you actually know where you want to wind up and you know what the options are, you can make a choice that is informed by business realities to increase your chances of success. The reality of the situation is that the vast majority of small businesses, and comics is, if you're an independent, comics is a small business, the vast majority of small businesses do not last past 5 years. it is also a reality that the vast majority of creative endeavors do not recoup their initial investment. So if you are looking at a creative project that usually doesn't recoup its money, and you're a small business that usually fails within 5 years, you have to look at it from the statistical standpoint that you are more than likely to not succeed. So having a business and legal foundation is going to definitely increase your percentage chances, increase the statistical possibility that you will succeed, but you are still the underdog in this situation. So, yes, there are NFTs. Yes, there is crowdfunding. Yes, there are alternative forms of distribution. There are ways to actually reduce your costs. There are all these kind of things, but you are still gambling. You're gambling with your creative ideas. And there's nothing wrong with it. You just have to understand it when you walk in and realize there is no magic bullet. There is no, well, if we just do this, this, and this, we will definitely succeed. No project definitely succeeds.
There's a whole thing with me where I have, I'm starting a day job next week. And there's a reason why I haven't gone into the creative field yet, because I have certain money, but I don't want to gamble that money per se. And I have certain commitments as far as investing and making sure that I'm planning for my financial future, and that, I want to buy a house in the next year. And so I can't afford to take certain gambles in that regard. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think a lot of comic creators don't understand that, or people want to do comics. Obviously it is a risk, and you could fail or you could go to the moon, where you could have the secret thing. And look, I'm rooting for everybody to say, hey, go for it. But also, you shouldn't mortgage your house to go for it either. At a certain point, I think a lot of people, there's a saying where, like, all these older comic creators who sort of got screwed on contracts, now when they have medical problems or when they pass away, they can't afford a funeral. And even a lot of people in indies, a lot of people, you might be doing a $40,000 Kickstarter, but you didn't make any money on your Kickstarter. And I think that, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you love doing this, that's fine. But I think that there's a big misconception. I think even having that legal foundation and that stuff is beyond helpful at this point. And I think that that's something that you're really providing, and it's very helpful in a lot of ways. And I think that, that's part of it, I think, is that also understanding risk and understanding how risk taking you want to be is so important. Like, I'm doing something in the next, 2 weeks, and it's a little bit of a risk, but it's not that big of a risk that I can't afford something.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the first chapters in the book is trying to help the reader understand what their risk tolerance is, especially in terms of their investment, because there's a certain amount of money. If you're going to try to go independent and own your book, there's a certain amount of money that has to go into the book. But like you said, you don't want to put risk money that you cannot afford to lose. So the money that goes into your rent or your food or whatever, that money is not really money that should be risked to create a comic. You should actually take the same money that you would put into an investment, or the same money that you would put into any kind of liquidity that you have. It is not essential to your survival. Okay, maybe that goes into comics. Maybe you put enough money in so you can get to the Kickstarter stage, where then you actually bring in crowdfunding from outside that mitigates your risk and actually covers, whether it's the print run or it's the alternative cover or whatever. That's part of making those wise business decisions, is looking at the finances and looking at what can you afford to lose.
Or what I like doing, and if I run a Kickstarter, what's going to happen is I'm going to probably self-fund the first book, but then with the Kickstarter money, it's going to pay for the printing, and then it's going to go in and fund the second round or the second issue, which is, I think, the way it should be done. And I think that people who are really smart understand, saying, look, the way I'll make my money is I won't make my money on the first issue. I might not make my money on the second, but if it's 6 issues, I will make money on issues 5 and 6 in the project. And it's a different way how to do it, saying, look, it's startup money is where I'm going. and then the machine becomes, a perpetual machine. The way I run, I buy and flip comics and then sell them. The way I run it, and I think that it's a great model, is that I'll buy a book for 20, and then what I'll do is that if I sell the book for 60, eBay takes 13%. Fine, I might walk away with $25, maybe $20 on it, $40 really after shipping and everything, and then I'll take that $20 out, put it into something else, and then I'll kick the 20 forward, and it funds the next thing. So now no new money is being put into the business, but rather if I lose everything, that $20 went into the stock market, went into an S&P fund, or went into something else. But now I'm taking money out of it, so the fund isn't growing, but no new money's being added. And I think that that's a really good business model that people should implement. And I know a bunch of creators who do that because it works very efficiently. But I think that it's very important, I feel, for people to not just have a legal education, but also understand what other people do. And I think you're really providing that. And I think it's really great. And I think it applies way more, not just to comics, but anything. In reality, coming up with an idea and doing other things. And so obviously I want people to join your class, because your class is very, very important. And I think that it can benefit people, and some people think they don't need it. And I think that, what it is? If you offer, I think, a yearly subscription and then a monthly subscription.
There's a monthly subscription, there's a 3-month subscription, there's a 6-month subscription, and there's an annual subscription. The longer the subscription you get, the less every month costs, but you have 4 different options. So you can pick and choose as you will.
And one of the things that I recommend is that, and this is just me, and this is probably how I'm going to start out, because I'm going to be cash flowing things for a while, is that, start out just in a month and see if this is a fit for you. Because obviously, I think it's what, $20, $25 for the monthly subscription, and then it goes down significantly.
If you get a monthly subscription, it is $20. If you get the 3-month, it's $19. 6-month is $18, and for the annual, it's $16 a month.
And so obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody says, hey, look, I'm not fully believing and I'm not fully trusting, I'm just going to do a month, or I'm going to do 3 months, and they're like, man, this is great, this is helpful, they could switch during month 4 into a year.
Yes, there is a mechanism for you to actually drop the initial subscription and then just order another subscription at the lower price per month. And what the good thing about joining now is that there's already a significant amount of content already in the service, because we record every video and then we put it into the archive, so that you can actually search the archive. And let's say you want to know exactly how to go about filing a copyright. Well, I have a class that is a screen by screen breakdown of what exactly you need to do to register your copyright. But if you're not ready for that part and you really want to know how to find freelance talent and negotiate a deal, you just go to that lesson, and then you can, watch that. And as you're looking at the videos, if you have questions, you can put the questions right into the video chat, and I will, we can work out the question there, work out what you need, or you can just jump on the weekly Q&A, which is kind of an adjunct to the class, and then ask anything that might have been outstanding in your brain or things that you're thinking about with relation to the video. So we already have like 9 classes up online. We have 4 expert interviews. We brought in agents and publishers and Kickstarter experts and things like that. So now is a good time to actually check it out, because there's already a body of knowledge there that you can look at that's going to grow every month.
And then even backing out of the class, because I am not good at filing copyrights. I am not good at filing a trademark. I'm not the guy who's going to do it. I have enough things on my mind. I'm going to be planning to file a bunch of stuff right as soon as I get money, hopefully when I'm obviously starting a job and I'm getting a paycheck, hopefully in 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be starting to sort of solidify certain components of my intellectual property. I'm going to be hiring a lawyer, because I'm going to mess it up. I'm really going to screw it up, because I understand that legitimately for me to sleep at night, I'll pay an extra $600 to sleep perfectly fine at night. Also, I want somebody to be doing it the correct way.
Right.
and also advising me. And I know that you have clients, and I'm sure that some people say, look, this is confusing. I appreciate the education. This is useful to me to know what my lawyer is doing, but you do a bunch of stuff as well, I think, with this. You're able to file trademarks and copyrights. Also, you know, I hate to say it, I could send a cease and desist to somebody, but it's a lot more powerful coming from a lawyer on their letterhead than it is from coming from me, a no name. Also, some people, when you're dealing with a Kickstarter that's going to be doing 100,000, you know, you might not want to do your contract yourself either, and you do a bunch of that because I know you offer a bunch of services.
Yeah.
And so, how does that work? Because you do it very interestingly versus somebody else does it, where you do it more on a document position.
Well, the way to understand the difference, you have to understand the way most lawyers operate. Most lawyers charge on a per hour basis, and those hours, you don't really know when you're starting out with any individual lawyer how long the whatever you're going to do is going to take. So if they say it's going to be $200 an hour, and you go, okay, well, and you think it's only going to take an hour, well, that's $200. That's fine. Then he tells you it's going to actually take like 7 hours. And now you're talking about a significantly higher bill than what you may have. And comic book creators, in my experience, do not necessarily have a lot of extra cash laying around to just hand to a lawyer.
Also, they might not be commuting in their head so quickly how fast this stuff's going to add up. My father's a lawyer, so I'm well aware of how much he charges an hour, and it can get very expensive. And my father's a trial lawyer, so yeah, it can get expensive real quick, guys.
Yes, except if you use an attorney like myself who has a different type of billing mechanism. I actually fund charge on a per document basis. So let's say you're a writer, you have an artist, and you want to get a collaboration agreement together before the Kickstarter gets launched. Well, you know, if you come to me, it's going to be a flat fee. It's not going to be per hour, and my flat fees are tailored to actually appeal to the comic book creator. So they are significantly lower than what any other attorney is going to charge. And because I have like 2 decades of experience in comics, I actually understand how comics works, how the business works, how the legal implications work. So we can make it a far more painless process to get you the whether you need a work for hire or you need a collaboration agreement or you need to have a business formed or you need your trademarks prosecuted or
Or a
anything like that.
licensing deal, something like that.
Licensing deal, option agreement for a film, all those things is all on a per document basis. So if you have questions about it after we actually go over it, we can sit down and have a conversation so you understand what it is that you're getting into. Going back to why I started this business in the first place. And that's not going to, I'm not going to charge you extra. There's not going to be a, oh, you were on the phone with me for 15 minutes. Now you owe me more money. It's not how I do things. You hire me to do the contract. I do the contract until you're at the point where either A, it's signed, or B, you decide the deal is falling apart and you don't want to do it anymore. But there's never going to be an extra charge just to talk to me about your contract. That's how I do
it. And I think it's very important because a lot of people in this, and I don't know your experience, but my experience is that I speak to comic creators and they don't want to do the marketing. And they because they're so exhausted from writing the book or drawing the book or putting the Kickstarter together or doing 15 interviews in 2 weeks to push out their stuff. They're tired from going to a con and they're like, man, I don't want to do all this marketing. I don't want to do the distribution. I don't want to make those phone calls at 8 o'clock at night. I don't want to sit around and let alone become a legal expert. I don't want to become a legal expert either. No offense to any lawyer profession. I made a conscious decision not to become an attorney. I would like to sleep at night. I would like to work in bureaucracy. 5 o'clock, we have work to do. Sorry, guys, it's 5 o'clock. Exactly. That's called government. I've made a conscious decision, but at the same time, I think that it is important for people to understand what their contracts are. And, you know, you don't have to understand every little detail of it to the point where, well, I cited law A, B, C, D, and E, and copyright law says it's 70 years or it's 90 years because of Sonny Bono. You know, I don't think anybody needs to know all those details, but they need to know what they can and can't do with their work. And I think, you know, I think creators who don't know that, I think it's a real problem in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's been a problem since Superman, pretty much, because since modern comics have actually existed in the United States, creators have been getting detrimental deals for the work that they've created. And
Maybe getting shellacked is a good word.
Unless you actually understand what it is that you're signing and why it is that you're signing it and what it is that you're going to be getting, you are opening yourself up to a lot of risk and a lot of pain. That is unnecessary. You don't have to do that.
And I just think that you know, it's people need to think about it, because it's not, comics is not all about creating comics. It's not all about the art. It's not all about the variant covers. It's not about, you know, getting your book into distribution. That is at best 30% of it, in which you need to have the legality stuff in there. You need to have infrastructure. You need to have an understanding where your content is going. And I think that you're one of the guys that's doing it out there. I don't know anybody else in this sector who is giving really in-depth advice and education, and even just getting somebody's brain to start thinking about it. You know, if somebody takes your class and picks up 80% of what you're saying, that means they're 80% more ready than before they entered your class. And 80% going from zero is massive.
Oh, absolutely. Because what usually happens, what has happened in the past, is that people learn about the business of comics, and people have learned about the business of comics for decades, but the way they learn it is by getting things wrong with their comics. Like, they'll try to make a comic and then realize that they didn't have enough money to fund the page rate. So the book is now half done. When they make the next book, they realize, okay, I need this amount of money, but you've wasted a certain amount of time and a certain amount of money learning basically on the job. Whereas you could take something like CPI, read the business of independent comic publishing, and actually go into it with a real idea of what it is that you're going to do and how it is you're going to do it. So it's not basically trial by error. And so you're not burning yourself out. You're not losing all your money. You're not losing all your time. You're not losing maybe the ownership of the characters themselves because you did the wrong deal. It's easier if you just learn it up front as opposed to trying to, you know, figure it out yourself.
And also, you're not burning a reputation. You're not burning a contact. You know, you're not, you know, unhappy in the deal. You're not costing somebody else money. And because you and I both know, and I'm sure you know, bad actors in comics, and I have enemies in comics. I'm sure that you do too. Everybody does. It's a very small community, and everybody knows who I don't like. It's not that hard. If you ask who Andrew Davis doesn't like in comics, it's pretty easy to find out. And most people that I speak to are like, no, you have justification for it, for what's happened. And I've been very, very open about what's happened. So it's not a secret. But it's the idea that it's a very small community. I mean, I know practically everybody who's somewhat big in this industry, and you know everybody who's big in this industry. And also I know that people come in and out of DC, on the DC now, out of Marvel, out of Image, and it's only getting tighter. It's only getting tighter. So, you know, obviously understanding just how to do things from a business point where nobody hates you, even though they might not be thrilled the business deal fell apart. It is a very good skill as well to understand. And legal contracts do that, because if everybody knows their place, you could be unhappy about it, but you're legally bound in that position.
And well, the best deals are those kind of deals where you feel like what you are getting is equal to what it is that you're giving up. So you're doing a deal and you have to do X amount of pages in Y amount of time, but the amount of money you're getting actually makes sense for that deal. And now nobody is upset. If the deal actually falls through, but you know that you still get ownership of the characters, or you still get your page rate, then everybody is still can still be happy. Not every not every deal is going to work out. Not every comic's going to work out, even if everybody does what they're supposed to do. Because, like we said, small businesses based on creative artistic projects more than likely are not going to recoup their investment. But that doesn't mean that you have to walk away from it with any kind of anonymity, because, well, you had a deal. The deal worked the way the deal worked.
Or sometimes a project is just ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm.
I've known projects that have had taken 3 or 4 times to fund on Kickstarter.
Right.
And there's a project that is going to be funding or attempting to fund, I think, in like 3 weeks for its fourth time on Kickstarter. And I'm sure that if that person has a legal deal, maybe the first 3 times didn't work out, but maybe both the artist and the writer understand, saying, look, we both own these characters and we have 50% ownership, and the business plan didn't work out, but not because of a contract. And that happens too. And it's very
Absolutely.
interesting. So
Absolutely.
obviously there's a lot there. I want people to obviously take this class, but I want to back out and ask you one more question before I give you the chance to, 2 more questions technically. And then I'm going to give you a chance to promote and really sell your class as much as you want. Because I think people really do need to take this. So obviously one of the things that's been going around as of lately, and you could plead the fifth. You could take the fifth, plead the fifth. You don't have to answer, but I'm super curious what your take is on the Jack Kirby stuff that's going on, because I am confused on it, where I don't know if they want Spider-Man as a character or if they just want the story with it. I don't really know, because I thought it was a work for hire, and I don't know what their claim is. I know that, obviously Paul Levitz was a professor of mine, and he sort of worked out the Superman deal to some degree when I was in college at Manhattanville. And he didn't speak about it. He hasn't disclosed anything to me, so nobody asked, and I don't want to be sued by DC or Boom at this point. But I know stuff was sort of worked out in that deal, but what is going on with that, and what's a work for hire, and what's the story behind that? Because I am utterly confused, and I think everybody else is as well.
Okay. Well, the situation that has actually came up in the past, I want to say 3 weeks. I think it was right before Comic-Con, was the Steve Ditko case. Now, the thing that actually kicked off the case was that the estate for Steve Ditko, because Steve Ditko passed away, actually filed a right of reversion, which means that they are attempting to get the copyright back for, I believe it is Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and maybe some other character. Now, when they did that, that actually started an unnecessary firestorm on the internet, because more than likely what's going to happen is, well, before I get into what's probably going to happen, let me go back a step. The issue is basically, did Steve Ditko create Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and then license them or grant the license to Marvel? Because if he did, then the right of reversion can actually kick in, and the estate of Steve Ditko can pull back the rights, the intellectual property rights in the copyright of Spider-Man. If Steve Ditko was actually working for Marvel as a work for hire, then there is no copyright for him to own, because he actually didn't own it in the first place. In which case, the copyright reversion claim gets thrown out and Marvel goes on about their business. The problem is, it is unclear at this point what Steve Ditko's actual legal relationship with Marvel was at the time that Spider-Man and Doctor Strange was created. Because the way, to the best of my understanding, the way Marvel did contracts back in the 50s and 60s is not the way Marvel does contracts now. Contracts are laid out in such a way that it is very clear that every writer and every artist does not own any of the characters that they're working on when they're working on a Marvel character, when a Marvel book. It goes even farther in that if you create a new character and you put it in a Marvel book, Marvel owns that too. But it's very clear in current contracts. It is not clear at all.
Usually with a Marvel contract, you might have a right of first refusal if they want to write it. And I know Chuck Dixon has that with Bane.
Well, Bane being a DC character is maybe a different scenario, but in most cases,
Yeah.
you sign what was referred to as a character creation addendum to your work for hire agreement. In that case, you actually sign over the rights to any character that you make, and depending on who you are and how influential you are, you may get what's called back end participation in the use of that in other media. But in many cases, you don't. You just make a character and you sign it away, and the character is gone. But the Steve Ditko case, it is unclear which scenario actually is going to apply. So they're going to have to work that out. Theoretically, they're going to work it out in court, but in reality, they're not going to work it out in court. They're going to actually work it out in some like boardroom on a Zoom call.
In mediation, boardroom type thing.
Right. And Disney will give the Ditko estate something, whether it's money on an ongoing basis or credit and money or something else. But the idea that you're going to wake up one day and Marvel's not going to have Spider-Man is extremely unlikely, to the point of I wouldn't even worry about it unless you're like a stockholder at Disney and you're not really sure how much this deal is going to cost. Then that's a financial issue. You don't really have to worry about that either. The other interesting piece of that is that Marvel then went out and looked at a lot of the characters that were created during that time. Black Widow and a lot of other characters that I think were related to the Avengers, to try to preemptively have all of the estates of those creators and stop them from doing what Steve Ditko is doing. And that came down like a couple days after the Steve Ditko case. So a lot of these things will actually shake out in the next few months or years. But again, Steve Ditko estate's going to make some money, which is nice. And Marvel's going to keep publishing Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and making Spider-Man movies and Doctor Strange movies and toys and video games and T-shirts and all the rest of that stuff.
I figured we would ask the lawyer this is his expertise, because it's not mine. I was confused on again. I was under the presumption that it's going to be sorted out.
It'll be sorted out
anytime soon.
It's just the details of how it will be sorted out.
I also think that everybody thinks they're a lawyer on the internet after watching Law and Order.
Everybody thinks they're a lawyer and a doctor and, airplane pilot, and, it's fine.
I figured you explaining it is much easier than everybody else explaining it. And it's sort of going to put it to rest, because this is where I'm going to point everybody in the next few weeks when they come at me or you, or we get into this discussion, no matter where we're at. So obviously, you're the expert. I'm not on this topic. I know my expertise is limited. I'm very good at buying and selling comics, and I'm somewhat decent at speaking. Somewhat decent. I could teach comic book investing all day, no problem. I could teach people how to do it. I could teach everybody how to do everything up and down. I could teach people how to day trade comics if you really want to. Which is a whole entity in and of its own right. I'm very good at that too. Lawyering, I will go hire a lawyer like you to solve my problems in comics.
Yep,
because I like to sleep at night.
A wise choice.
I much prefer to do that versus handling it myself, because I will screw it up and I'll somehow get my character rights, my cute little elf, into Marvel by accident. Which I mean, if I somehow trademarked and copyrighted my elf into Marvel, there'd be a million questions, and I might just let them keep it.
Yeah, it's less hassle that way.
I'll write the book, How You Trademark Something into Marvel. I'll make millions. and then I'll get a cease and desist. And my career and yours will be over, because they'll cite this interview. So having said all that, though, I am curious, because New York Comic Con just dropped. And obviously, I don't know if you were there
Yep,
at
I
New
was
York
there.
Comic Con. So were you there as a fan or just walking around, or were you there with Comic Book Legal Defense Fund or in a booth, or what capacity? Just curiosity.
Well, most of the time when I go to Comic Con, it is a place where several things have to happen at once from a business standpoint. One, there are a number of panels that I am on a fairly consistent basis that I have to appear at. Two, there's the artist alley where I usually like to touch base with a lot of my clients, see how things are going for them, actually talk about, where they're going in the next, next year, 2 years. Got to take some time for the show floor to buy some, buy things that you don't necessarily need and put it on the wall. And then I have to spend a pretty significant amount of time once the show floor is closed, actually interacting with the people who are in the industry, because comics is one of those things that its production is geographically dispersed. So you may not see or hang out with the people that you do business with all the time unless you actually go to a con. So that's when the dinners and the drinks and the social gatherings happen. So you can actually have that human interaction, because not everything can be done over a Zoom call. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm not going to be able to do, and I have to figure out a different way how to do that because I have a disability. So it's going to be a
Mhm.
very interesting thing how I'm going to figure out how to network within that capacity when I'm entering the fray, which is coming in the next year.
Mhm.
So I'm going to figure it out though, because it's New York Comic Con. No offense to New York Comic Con, it is not a disability friendly convention.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Having navigated it myself, I can vouch for that. Yeah.
I went once and I did not have a good time. It was rather difficult, and I will avoid it like the plague. And nothing, the Javits Center should be torn down and rebuilt. I mean, it's outdated. I think it's a safe assumption to say. Um, not saying that the New York Comic Con, it's not New York Comic Con's fault. It's just
Mhm.
circumstantial what's happened. But even going further into this, obviously, I think it was sort of a lighter con, and it was a very interesting con. I wasn't paying much attention to it because I wasn't going. I have other things going on in my life that are more important at the moment. But what was it like? New York Comic Con. Also, where do you think cons are going? And where do you think we are going in the next year with conventions? Because obviously COVID has done some damage to comics, and I'm part of the great digital pivot,
Mhm.
meaning that I want to increase my capacity online. And I think you're somewhat in that space right now, very much where I want to market to the world, and I don't
Mhm.
want to market just to the US or at a con. And also, I'm building a digital product, which makes sense. And you have a digital product.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, to let's start with the first part first. New York Comic Con this year was lighter. I want to say it was, just eyeballing it, 50% lighter, and just in terms of the number of people that were there, the number of retailers that were there, the number of corporations that actually showed up. But what that did was it actually made it much easier to move around. It made it much easier to actually see things. And you wouldn't walk up towards a booth and go, okay, that booth is like, there's 15 people deep. There's no way I'm ever going to get to see what's there. So I'm going to just skip it. This year, you just walk up to a booth and you can buy stuff and talk to people, and it's great. Because they actually they opened up that new pavilion for, it's like a 5-floor pavilion they opened up for the panels. The panels were much more comfortable and spacious, and the overall experience, because I hadn't gone to any cons for about a year and a half, so it was actually good to get the experience of going back to a con, because I always enjoy the experience. It's as tiring as it is. Always enjoy the experience. And two, because there were fewer people there, it was much easier to actually move around and do business, because I'm trying to interact with people and talk shop, make deals, close deals. It's much easier when there are fewer people there, in the overall space. Where do I think cons are going in the next year? I believe you're going to have a little bit more of a dip, and then in 2022 you're going to have an uptick, and that uptick is probably going to continue to like 2025 and beyond, because you're going to get more and more small to mid-tier publishers who are going to actually get their first shot at being at at being at a con, because that's one of the things that I actually noticed in New York Comic Con. People who were on the waiting list and couldn't get in and couldn't get a booth, couldn't get a table, now all of a sudden, oh, now you're in, and now you're actually making money. They're selling through all their product. So I think because cons are a somewhat direct form of distribution, in that if you can actually get your product to the city and you can actually set up a table, there's very few other costs that you have to worry about in terms of distributing your product. I think you're going to actually see more and more people going to cons till it gets back to the point where it was 2018, 2019. I think digital is going to actually integrate itself into the con experience. I don't think it's an either or situation. I think a lot more cons are going to have digital components, and a lot more people going to cons will actually integrate that into their digital plans, whether they're live streaming or whether they're actually selling things that are digital exclusives at the con, or they're integrating the con experience to their digital experience. I think there's going to be a merging of the two, so that depending on what your business model is, there may be some cons that you attend, some cons you don't attend. Maybe you attend, maybe you're 100% print, maybe you're 100% digital. But I think it's going to be a spectrum, and people will actually figure out, especially with independent comics, where their book fits, where their business model fits in that spectrum, and then they'll go from there.
I mean, I think these cons can take a page out of wrestling. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the coolest things wrestling did is that there was no fan shows. And
Right.
so what they put up while it was streaming online is all the wrestlers' QR codes that have linked to their um, merch stores,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually drove sales. And it's in a lot of ways, I think that's the way of the future. Is that, and I think people who are really smart are going to figure out, hey, how do I market myself? How do I market other people? And I think conventions can become really, really, really smart and
Mm-hmm.
become really friendly to people, especially if you have a digital and you're getting people from all over the world at your con,
Mm-hmm.
live streaming. I mean, I've been live streaming my panels that I used to do, before obviously everything shut down. I would live stream every single panel onto my Facebook wall and onto YouTube and other places, because why wouldn't I? I was
Mm-hmm.
getting more views on YouTube live than I was at cons. And
Right.
especially when you have 3 people in your room and then you have 40 people watching, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it changes the dynamic of how you do a presentation. And also
Absolutely.
just filming a presentation, because you never know when you're going to recycle content.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I'm personally in the camp that I don't know if I'm ever going back to a con. At this stage, I am pumping out so much content, and that when I get out of my parents' house, I'm going to be building a studio, and I might kick it up to 6 a week,
Mm-hmm.
going from 4 to 6. And I mean, I'm doing well right now with this, and I actually have a pretty big wait list. So, I mean, I have a unique problem
Right.
where there's
Right.
not enough of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't even entered the comic world yet. And maybe that's the reason why is I'm not producing a comic. I'm producing a Facebook Live podcast stream.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's why I'm the way I am. But I digress. I'm not too sure where I'm going to be in the next year. But I'm going to take it step by step. And also, I like smaller cons because they're just easier to navigate, and you get to speak to creators, which is what I want to do.
Right.
And New York Comic Con's a terrifying place in a lot of ways. So that's how I feel, is that not saying not to go, it's just not, it's hard to navigate. But I digress. So obviously you got a lot of stuff going on. You do a lot of speaking, you do a lot of things. I think with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, you do some free panels that they offer, and there's some stuff out there with that, and I like that because obviously I know Dennis Kitchen, and phenomenal interview with him, phenomenal that I did. So where can people find you on social media? Where can people join your Facebook group? What people should not post in your Facebook group that will get them declined? Also, where can people sign up for your class? Where can people, get a sense of what's out there, and even just, any resources that you might have, and obviously, if I didn't mention Twitter, Instagram, Facebook pages, all that jazz.
The easiest way to find me is if you just find Gamal Hennessy, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you're going to find me. If you look for the Facebook group, it will be the Business of Comic Book Publishing. You can actually join that group, and as long as your Facebook page has something to do with comics and it wasn't created like a month ago, then I will probably let you on, and it's not going to be a problem. If you want to get a free consultation for the legal aspects of your comic book project, you can go to creativecontractconsulting.com. It's all one word. And you can sign up to request a free consultation, and we can set that up for you then. If you would like to actually join the Comics Publishing Institute, you can also go to creativecontractconsulting.com. And in the one of the pages you can select is the Comics Publishing Institute. And there are videos on that page that actually explain what the Institute does, what you get, and then there's a link that you can then go to the actual learning management software and sign up to become a member.
And for those who are interested, I just put the group in there. So that's the group. I know it's got a bunch of numbers in it. It's just copy and paste it or click in the links down below. This is for the people on YouTube as well. Obviously, Facebook's not allowing me to post in my private group, which is annoying, but that happens. But you can join my private group too. It's completely free. Again, anything with comics. If you post eBay sales, I'm going to just take down your post. Then don't post hentai or porn as well. I prefer that not in my group because, well, Facebook doesn't like that. But in all seriousness, though, and going forward, if you really want to be in comics, you should be joining this program. And if you really want to make sure, because as you stated, most businesses and most ventures in this area do fail, and it's not easy to stick around to do this, and very few people do. People start and then they don't continue. It's a tough road to go down, but the more knowledge you have in creating things, and there's plenty of good books, and also the business side of it, because comics are a business, the more likely you are to be successful. And this is just one area that's going to give you a foundation of how to be successful and how to, give you that little bit of an edge up. And as he stated, and as Gamal stated, there's a lot of information in this class, and there's constant new things. And whenever something new comes out, it's very reactionary. And so that's something very important to understand as well, is that this is a reactionary thing where content isn't just pre-created. It is generated every week or every other week. And so if a major change happens in the next 3 weeks, it's going to be addressed. And then also you could rewatch all this stuff and pay attention. So if you don't understand something, or you forgot how to do a copyright, filing, there you go, or you need trademark help, or you're like me and I'm an idiot at this stuff, I'm going to have to, when I join this venture, I'm going to have to watch that video like 10 times. But that's important. It sounds crazy when I say it, but somebody might want to say, look, I'm on the website, what do I do now? I'm on the website, what do I do for step 2? I'm on the website, what do I do for step 3? And they might go step by step by step, and it might take them 3 hours to do it, but they're going to do it correctly.
That's the point of the screen by screen analysis. Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're doing it right and it takes you 3 hours, I'm down for it. So obviously you should go do that. Obviously join the Facebook group, follow on social media, LinkedIn, all that stuff. Also, if maybe you do get declined, sort of maybe explain, because maybe you're a brand new comic and you just did 20,000 on Kickstarter, and I'm sure there's exceptions made where some people are just killing it and they're just brand new in week 2. Happens. I know this because there are people in my Facebook group that are like that. So obviously, that being said, I'm also an independent content creator. I appreciate shares. I appreciate likes. I appreciate hearts. I appreciate people, obviously sharing this interview out. It goes a long way when somebody shares something out for me. Obviously, I like when people like my Facebook page. You like my YouTube page or subscribe to YouTube. I have Buy Me a Coffee. I do like coffee. Dunkin' Donuts has an amazing donut that looks like a spider, and I would like to go buy one of those things on Friday. So you could buy me a coffee, and then I'll go buy a donut. It'll be great. Obviously, my friend Rob has his project going on, Snowball. That's in the comment sections up above. Go check that book out. I think you won't be disappointed in that. And yeah, go actually take this class, guys. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And if you're skeptical, just sign up for a month. And then if you love it, you could upgrade to 3 months, 6 months, or a year. And if you're serious about this and you really want to commit, this is a really good place to start with comics. And you're going to get the PDF of the book, and you're going to get the foundations, and you're going to be that much more likely to be successful. I can't promise anything, and Gamal can't promise anything. But all I think we can collectively say is that the more information you have, the better off you're going to be. And so on that note, I'm going to give you the final word because I've been doing enough talking.
Well, the only thing I would say is you learning about the business and legal aspects of making your comics will mean you will have more fun making your comics because you will worry less about the money that you're spending, about the time that you're spending, about the intellectual property that you are developing. Once you actually understand how the business works, that part becomes less stressful and the creative side becomes more enjoyable. So if you enjoy making comics, this is going to be part of that enjoyment. So there you go.
I don't think I could have said it any better myself. So that's a wrap.